Hey guys, tonight we heading straight into the teeth of one of the harshest winters ever recorded on the American frontier. The long winter of 1880 to 1881. And just to level with you, you probably won't survive this. Unless you've got nerves of steel, a cast-iron stove, and maybe a cow living in your kitchen. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step outside into the chill of late October 1880. Your breath fogs in the air, and it's already too cold for this time of year. The sky has a strange stillness, a bruised purple hue, as if something massive is holding its breath. The horizon disappears into a wall of white-gray cloud. By mid-morning, snowflakes start falling, not the polite kind that drift down like feathers, but wet, heavy ones, slapping your face with icy indifference. You don't know it yet, but this storm is only the beginning of what will become an unrelenting 7-month siege of winter. Your homestead, a low sod house carved into the Dakota prairie, isn't ready. Who would be? It's October. The usual pattern calls for snow in December, a hard freeze in January, and a thaw by March. And the real terror settles in. Not that it snowed, but that it's still October. You've got months to go. Snow muffles everything. The landscape has gone silent. There's no birdsong, no wind, just a weird, dead hush. You look out and realize your outbuildings are almost entirely buried. The livestock shelter is flattened under the weight of the snow. You check on your few chickens, shivering and clucking in confusion, and the old cow who looks back at you with wide, dark eyes, like she knows what's coming. November arrives, but the snow doesn't stop. It just keeps falling, piling up, creating a vast, white desert. The train, your only link to the outside world, is supposed to bring coal for your stove and flour for bread. You start burning anything you can spare. Old furniture, fence posts, even twists of hay soaked in grease. The cold is a physical presence. It seeps through the sod walls, through the cracks in the door. Frost forms on the inside of the cabin, tracing strange, beautiful patterns on the walls that you're too cold to appreciate. You wear every layer you own and still shiver. By December, the monotony is maddening. You grind wheat meant for next year's seed in a small coffee grinder, a back-breaking process that takes hours to produce a cup of coarse flour for a small, gritty loaf of bread. The children are getting thin, their faces pale. Their laughter has faded. Desperation leads to innovation. You invent a button lamp, a small dish of axle grease with a button and a rag for a wick. It casts a sputtering, smoky light, just enough to see the faces of your loved ones huddled around the fire. Outside, the blizzards return with renewed violence. The wind howls like a demon, shaking the little sod house to its foundations. You can hear the snow pelting the roof, and you pray the sod holds. The temperature drops to 40 below zero and stays there. January is the darkest time. The sun is a pale, useless disk in the sky. Does it even matter? Her body heat helps keep the cabin from freezing completely, and her presence is strangely comforting. A warm, living thing in a world of ice. But feeding her is another challenge. You dig through 20 feet of snow to reach the haystacks, a monumental effort for a few armfuls of feed. The blizzards become so frequent, they start to blur into one long, continuous storm. You barely see the sun for weeks at a time. Then, in February, a brief thaw. Hope flickers. The snow melts just enough to turn the world into a muddy, slushy mess. Maybe, just maybe, it's over. But it's a cruel trick. A new blizzard, the worst one yet, roars in, followed by a cold snap that freezes the slush into a solid sheet of ice, locking everything down again. This is when hope truly starts to die. People are starving. Some are burning their own homes for warmth, piece by piece. You wake up one morning and hear a sound you haven't heard in 7 months. The drip, drip, drip of melting snow. A tiny stream of water trickles from the roof. The snowdrifts shrink, revealing the dead, brown prairie underneath. And then, one day, you hear it. A distant whistle. The train. The first train in 7 months. It's a sound of salvation. You stepped into a blizzard and emerged, 7 months later, a different person, forged in the crucible of ice and hunger. And you know you'll never take a simple thing like warmth, or food, or the sound of a train for They're skinning her now, hoping to salvage the meat before it stiffens too much to butcher. You invite the boy to stay for a cup of something hot, but you don't have much to offer. Just weak tea made from boiled pine needles and some stale cornbread. He thanks you anyway. He's 15, but already has the eyes of someone older, someone who's seen more snow than any boy should. The sky darkens again. More snow. You hold your breath, a familiar knot tightening in your stomach. Then, you wake up in the middle of the night to a crushing silence. It's not the peaceful quiet that settles after a gentle snowfall. This is a heavy, suffocating silence. It feels like the world has been blanketed over and smothered. You lie perfectly still, listening. You're waiting for the crackle of the stove, the groan of the wind against the walls, anything. But there's nothing, not even the usual creak of the rafters. It's as if the outside world has swallowed every single sound. The fire must have gone out. You pull on your heavy kotor, what's left of it, with last year's wear and moth holes. The floorboards burn cold right through your wool socks as you step carefully toward the stove. Opening the door reveals just a pile of ash and a few faint, dying embers. It's still early, but the house is already colder than it was last night. You're losing heat faster than you can make it. Your home is a dugout, with thick walls made of sawed chunks of earth you stacked and packed by hand. They insulate better than wood, but even they have their limits. The snow outside has drifted so high that you have to crawl through a tunnel just to reach your own front door. Your tiny window is nothing but a dull, frozen square of ice. You light a lantern and watch your breath cloud in the air. This isn't just cold. It's a spiteful, bone-deep cold. The kind that doesn't just numb your skin but settles deep into your joints and stays there. You step outside for a moment. The storm has passed, but the landscape is completely transformed. Your little dugout is just a slight bump in a vast sea of white. The barn, it's gone. Completely buried. The only way you know where it used to be is a single stick you planted in the ground weeks ago, now barely visible. You poke around the chimney, brushing off the crusted snow, and listen. Just a faint whisper of wind across miles and miles of emptiness. It's a strange feeling. You know you're not alone out here. Across the prairie, other families are trapped, just like you, walled in by the snow, clinging to whatever they have left. Some are in one-room shacks, others in dugouts. You hear stories later. One family near Brookings had to tunnel upward, right through their own roof, to escape a snowdrift that sealed their door shut. They used a cast-iron skillet as a shovel. Can you even imagine that? Swinging a frying pan at your own ceiling, just to breathe. Life becomes a grim routine. You start each day by checking for drafts, plugging the holes in your walls with scraps of cloth or mud that freezes almost as fast as you can spread it. The fire demands constant attention, which means hauling in fuel, and your supply is already running dangerously low. At night, you light just one lamp. It's barely enough to see by, but its soft glow against the packed dirt walls offers a small comfort. The shadows it casts flicker and dance like ghostly fingers. You spend hours just staring at nothing. There's no real difference between night and day, anymore, just varying shades of gray. The snow outside reflects so much light that it completely messes with your sense of time. One day just bleeds into the next until you're not even sure what month it is. You start marking the days with little slashes on a wooden beam above your bed. It doesn't really help. Time has become abstract, and the silence, it never leaves. No birds, no wind, no footsteps. It's like the world's volume has been turned all the way down. Every now and then, you think you hear a knock on the door or a voice calling from the field. You rush to check, but of course, there's nothing. Just more white, more silence. You tell yourself it's just your mind playing tricks on you. But with each phantom sound, the loneliness seeps in a little deeper. These were the realities for thousands of pioneers during the hard winter of 1881. It was a test of endurance that pushed human beings to their absolute limits. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing for more tales from history. The windows are nothing but solid walls of snow. The only light comes from a flickering lamp, casting long, dancing shadows that play tricks on your mind. Outside, the wind howls a relentless, mournful song. You can't tell if it's day or night. Time blurs into an endless cycle of waiting, rationing, and listening to the storm. You think about sending a note, maybe a signal, but the thought is fleeting. Getting there would mean wading through waist-high snow, maybe even higher. There's no guarantee you'd find the trail back. The risk is too great. The isolation is absolute. Then the strange dreams begin. You're walking across a vibrant prairie in full bloom, with green grass up to your knees and wildflowers waving in the breeze. But suddenly, the wind turns bitingly cold. The sky darkens, and you feel the weight of the world pressing down on you. You're buried. You wake up gasping for air, clawing at your blankets. A small part of you is grateful it's just a dream. The rest of you isn't so sure. The line between nightmare and reality has begun to fade. Here's something unsettling that no one ever tells you about: sod houses. They breathe. When the temperature inside rises even slightly, the earthen walls weep. Moisture trickles down in tiny rivulets, which then freeze solid when the cold returns. You start seeing little icicles forming on the inside, dangling like sharp teeth from the ceiling. They believed modernity could conquer nature. Even the native tribes, who had adapted to the prairie for generations and were experts at surviving its harsh conditions, found that winter brutal. And so, you're left with the haunting what-ifs. What if you'd gathered more firewood, stored more coal? Regret is a luxury you can't afford when survival is the only thing that matters. But in this bleak, frozen world, there's a strange and unexpected bright spot. Your house may be buried, but snow is a surprisingly effective insulator. Children went to school in light coats, and farmers tended to their livestock far from shelter. Then, without warning, the temperature plummeted. One famous account is of a school teacher named Minnie Freeman in Nebraska. Her bravery became legendary. But for every story of survival, there are countless tragedies. Families were torn apart. The official death toll was 235, but historians believe the true number was much higher, as many victims were lone homesteaders whose deaths went unrecorded. The storm reshaped the landscape and the psyche of the American West. It was a brutal reminder that for all the promises of manifest destiny, the prairie was a formidable and unforgiving land. The silence after the storm was just as eerie as the howling wind during it. It also led to a greater respect for the power of nature and a more cautious approach to life on the prairie. The blizzards served as a harsh lesson in humility. For them, survival depended on their wits, their foresight, and a whole lot of luck. The stories of the sod house survivors are a powerful testament to the human spirit's ability to endure even in the most extreme circumstances. It's a low, distant growl, something mechanical. You freeze, every muscle tense. But you're moving, fueled by adrenaline, your heart hammering against your ribs. You never even got close enough to hear its whistle. Back inside, the warmth of the stove does little to thaw the chill that has settled deep inside you. No one says a word. If there's family with you, or maybe a neighbor who got caught by the storm, they don't need to ask. They saw it too. They know what it means. No train means no supplies. No coal to keep the fire going strong. No flour for bread. No mail. No news from the outside world. You are completely sealed off, cut adrift from everything by a dozen storms, stacked one on top of the other like cold, white prison walls. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The railroad was meant to be our lifeline, a promise of abundance delivered on iron tracks. Trains were supposed to roar into the station every week, their cars overflowing with sacks of sugar, crates of potatoes, barrels of molasses. That's what the homestead posters back east had promised, wasn't it? A new life on the prairie, plenty for everyone, a fresh start. But those colorful posters, with their smiling families and fields of golden wheat, they conveniently forgot to mention one crucial detail. They didn't mention that a single blizzard, a relentless, unforgiving force of nature, could stop an entire train line cold. Literally, the silence is the first thing that gets to you. We've grown so accustomed to the rhythm of the rails, the distant chug of an approaching engine, the lonely wail of a whistle echoing through the valley at dusk. That low rumble was the sound of connection, a reminder that we weren't entirely alone out here on this vast, empty expanse. Now, that sound is gone, replaced by a silence so profound, so absolute, it feels deafening. All that's left is the ceaseless, mournful groan of the wind as it pushes against the walls of our little house, and the slow, heavy ticking of my own heart. News travels in whispers, in fragments of stories, carried by the brave or the desperate. A letter smuggled in by a daring mail runner, a neighbor who miraculously made it back from town with tales of snowdrifts as high as the telegraph poles. They say the drifts have swallowed entire stretches of track, burying the iron arteries that were supposed to feed the plains. The railroad companies, in a show of force against a storm, tried sending a rotary snowplow, a monstrous machine mounted on the front of a powerful locomotive designed to chew through the snow and clear the way. But the prairie winter just laughed. The machine jammed with ice within minutes, its massive blades frozen solid. Defeated, there's a story making the rounds, and who knows if it's truth or rumor anymore, but it feels true. They say a locomotive got stuck in a drift just outside of Huron, South Dakota. The crew abandoned it, seeking shelter from the blinding whiteout. When the storm broke for a moment, the next morning, the train was gone, vanished. It had been completely swallowed by a drift overnight, looking for all the world like just another snowbank on the horizon. They didn't find it for days. Now, even the railway workers, the men who were supposed to conquer this wilderness, are holed up in their own shelters. The message is clear. We're on our own. So you passed along, colorless hours, staring at the wall, at the frost creeping across the window panes. You listen to the house creak and settle under the immense weight of the snow on its roof. The days blur together, a monotonous cycle of pale light and encroaching darkness. You start to do strange things to keep your mind from unraveling. You count the cracks in the ceiling, tracing their spidery paths with your eyes until you have them memorized. You recite recipes out loud from memory, trying to conjure the taste of butter melting on warm bread, the sweetness of a spoonful of jam. You reread the same passages from an old newspaper, the same verses from the Bible, until the words lose all meaning and become just patterns on a page. If you're lucky, you're not alone. If you have family, you huddle together for warmth, your conversations spoken in low, hushed tones. You talk about spring. You talk about the thaw, the feel of soft earth under your boots, the smell of damp soil. You plan your garden, deciding where the corn will go, where you'll plant the beans. You talk about anything and everything except the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. You don't say the word hungry out loud. To speak it is to give it power, to let it take root in the room and grow into something monstrous. So you sip your weak broth made from boiled leather scraps, and you talk about the sun. The mail, you'd think, would stop completely. And for the most part, it has. But every now and then, a legend is born. A teenager on a pair of rickety snowshoes, driven by a sense of duty, or perhaps just youthful recklessness, makes the trek between settlements. A stoic Norwegian farmer, with a homemade sled and a stubborn refusal to be beaten, carries a small sack of letters. These people become more than just mail carriers. They are symbols of defiance. They aren't legends because they survived, but because they kept moving. Through drifts taller than houses, through wind so fierce it strips the skin from your cheeks, through the ever-present threat of frostbite that turns fingers black and brittle. We hear of one such man, a ghostly figure, moving through the white landscape. He travels from town to town with a sack of mail lashed to his back, a wool scarf frozen stiff across his mouth and nose. They say he sleeps, standing up, leaning against trees, because to lie down in the snow is to invite death. He delivers letters that are weeks, maybe months old, but it doesn't matter. A piece of paper with a familiar handwriting is a treasure beyond price. It brings news, sometimes good, sometimes heartbreaking. A hastily scribbled note saying we're alive can bring tears of relief. A line promising that supplies are on their way, somewhere, somehow, can light a flicker of hope that sustains you for another day. Outside, the animals are suffering too. The cow, once a source of rich milk, barely moves in her stall. She just stands there, her breath pluming in the frigid air, her eyes dull. The chickens have long since stopped laying. Their coop is silent. The thought crosses your mind, a dark and practical whisper. Cull one. Just one, for the meat. A single chicken could mean a real meal, a moment of strength, but it's a hard line to cross. These animals, they're not just livestock anymore. They are a living, breathing connection to a normal life, a reminder of a time when the world made sense. You'd rather starve for a few more days, chew on another piece of leather, than kill the very thing that represents hope. And then there are the darker stories, the ones whispered on the edge of sanity. They say that, in one of the most isolated towns, a group of men got desperate. They decided to dig a tunnel through the snow, an underground passage to the next settlement, miles away. They worked in shifts, digging through the dense, packed snow, a desperate, mole-like struggle for survival. The story goes that the tunnel collapsed. 2 men were buried alive, crushed under the weight of the very thing they were trying to escape. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. You believe it could have happened, because that's the kind of winter this is. It's a winter that dares you to fight back, to show your strength and your will to survive. And then, when you're at your most vulnerable, it crushes you without a second thought. It reminds you that out here, on the prairie, nature doesn't make promises, and it certainly doesn't keep them. Still, you get up the next morning. A week ago, you thought it was empty, but now, you know better. Or one of those thick molasses cookies from back in town, the kind the storekeeper used to keep in a big glass jar on the counter. You dream about it more often than you'd care to admit. Sometimes you wake up and your jaw is sore, and you realize you were chewing in your sleep. A kind of homespun chemistry takes over in times like these. You've read or heard about folks using bark tea to keep their bellies full. They say if you boil it long enough, skim the hair off the top, it becomes something thick enough to eat. You've crossed a threshold where resilience starts to look like madness, and every single decision feels like a test. Do you eat the seed grain, or do you starve with your principles? Do you burn the heirloom chair for warmth, or do you freeze with dignity? The frontier makes a philosopher out of you, whether you want it to or not. There's a story going around about a boy in the next county over. Someone said he carved a spoon out of a fence post, just so he could feel like he was using a proper utensil. They say he eats pine needle soup with it every night, sitting by the dim glow of a lantern. I can't say if the story's true or not, but I like it, so I keep telling it. It's funny what passes for hope these days, isn't it? Whatever the reason, they're the ones still enjoying dried apples and, if the rumors are true, occasional slices of bacon. If you're on speaking terms with them, you might get a scrap of jerky or maybe a single hard biscuit. If you're not, well, you try your best not to look toward their house when the wind shifts and carries the smell of cooking meat your way. It's a special kind of torture. Inside my own four walls, life has become a carefully choreographed ritual. A dance of survival. Every meal is timed. Every single ember from the fire is saved and coaxed back to life. The idea of leftovers doesn't even exist anymore. They're sacred relics from a forgotten time. We scrape our plates so clean they barely need washing. And when they do, the dishes only get cleaned once a day, using melted snow and a sliver of lye soap so thin it practically bends when you touch it. The days feel shorter now. Maybe they are, or maybe the constant gray just makes it feel that way. You have to keep moving, just to stay warm. The cold seeps into your bones if you stand still for too long. So you work. You patch clothes with bits of twine. You boil scraps of old cloth to soften them into rags. The other day, someone suggested making soup from newspaper ink. but they smile. They always smile. Because that simple act means you're both still alive. Another day one. You sit by their stove for a while, sharing what little warmth it offers. You exchange rumors about the weather, each one more grim than the last. Maybe, if you're lucky, you'll split a meal. Half a biscuit, a few spoonfuls of a stew made from potato peels, or something that vaguely resembles what used to be cabbage. It doesn't matter what it is. It's the sharing that counts. And you talk about the trains. You always talk about the trains. Any word from the station, you'll ask, "See any smoke on the horizon?" The answer is always the same. No, but you have to ask. You have to keep that hope alive, that one day a whistle will cut through the silence. Years from now, scholars will probably debate whether we should have seen this coming. Some will point to that early October storm as a clear warning shot from nature. Others will argue that even the seasoned native tribes were caught off guard, their usual mobility hampered by an unusually wet summer and the early, heavy snow that just never stopped. Some settlers did have options. They had friends to stay with further south, or they had the means to pack up their wagons and flee before the worst of it hit. But most of us stayed. Was it pride, stubbornness, or was it just the cold, hard truth that for many of us, there was nowhere else to go? This was it. Even now, sitting here, I don't really think about leaving. I'm too far in. We've spent years building this place, plowing this unforgiving land, raising that sagging fence line by hand. You can't just walk away from it, not just because winter decided to turn mean. It feels like a betrayal of everything you've worked for. So instead, you do what everyone else is doing. You get up in the morning, you breathe a cloud of fog into your scarf, and feel the brief warmth on your face. Maybe tomorrow, it's breakfast, or what passes for it now, and you're chewing on something that used to be food. A piece of flatbread so hard it could double as a roof shingle. You dunk it in your tea, which is more snowmelt than anything else, boiled with a few stray seeds you found in the bottom of a feed sack. It's bitter and gritty, but warm. That's what matters now. Warm. By now, the flour's long gone. The corn's gone, too. All that's left is what was never meant to be eaten. Seed grain tucked away in burlap sacks. You stare at it for days before you give in. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll save some for planting. But when hunger presses in, soft promises turn hard fast. You grind it in small batches with a metal meat grinder clamped to the table. It squeals and wobbles with each crank, scattering bits of precious grain dust across the tabletop. You scrape up every flake with your fingernail. The bread you make from it is bad. Not just bad, like stale or bland. It tastes like punishment. Gritty, oily. There's a strange sharpness to it that makes your teeth ache. Your stomach protests after every bite, but you force it down. You remind yourself that pioneers did this before, that people have lived through worse. Whether that's true doesn't matter. The lie is keeping you alive. One neighbor tried grinding grass seed. Another, some sort of wild weed they found under a wind-blown patch of earth. The results are unpredictable. Some taste like dirt. Some cause vomiting. One man, they say, made something that sent him into a fever dream for 2 days. Talking to people who weren't there, sweating through his blankets while the wind howled outside. His wife says he woke up clearer than he'd been in years. Other folks say she's just covering for the fact he went a little funny. You hear stories, lots of them, about people cooking leather shoes into soup, about folks boiling wallpaper to suck nutrients from the paste. You don't know what's real and what's just a desperate imagination of the frozen. Either way, it keeps conversation going in the evenings when you're all wrapped in quilts, watching the stove flicker like it's the only moving thing left on earth. Your own recipes have become more creative by necessity. Last week, you made a pudding from water, a pinch of salt, and a bit of wild honey someone gave you back in September. You thickened it with pine pitch and served it in a broken teacup. You ate it slowly like it was custard. Someone cried a little. You all pretended not to notice. The cow in the barn has stopped giving milk. She's as miserable as you are, maybe more. Her coat is ragged from rubbing against the walls of her tiny shelter. And you've started bringing her handfuls of dried weeds again, not meant for consumption. You keep a fire going in her stall at night, fed with leftover corn cobs, broken tool handles, whatever wood you can spare. It's a weird thing, protecting an animal that's supposed to feed you. But you need her, not just for milk, but for company, for sanity. The moment the cow walks into the kitchen, you know your life has crossed into a realm you never imagined. Her hooves clop against the wooden floorboards, tentative but surprisingly polite. She stops just shy of the stove, like she knows better than to knock over the kettle. You clear a space in the corner and lay down old quilts and a torn feed sack. She sighs. Yes, she actually sighs, and settles in, as if this is perfectly normal. And in a way, it is now. You'd been thinking about it for weeks. The barn was barely holding on. You had to dig it out more than once, shovel the roof clear after every storm, and even then, it creaked and groaned like a dying ship in a frozen sea. The wind slipped through the gaps in the boards, cutting straight into your cow's hide. Her breath came out in short, labored puffs. You couldn't lose her. She was all that stood between your family and the abyss of no milk, no butter, and no hope. So now she lives with you. You keep her in the kitchen during the worst of it, right next to the stove where it's warmest. She doesn't complain, and truth be told, neither do you. Her body heat helps more than you ever expected. It's like sharing a space heater with 1,200 pounds of quiet, living warmth. The smell is present, strong, a heavy mix of wet fur, manure, and something wild. But after a day or two, it just fades into the background. It becomes another layer of life in the layered stink of survival. She's not the only guest. In the next homestead over, you hear they've got chickens roosting on their mantle. Down the road, a goat lives in a pantry. Somewhere near Sioux Falls, someone brought in 2 sheep and a piglet and keeps them behind a curtain in the parlor. Nobody judges anymore. You just nod. You understand. It's about doing what you have to do to make it through. It gets strange in here sometimes. One morning, the cow licks your arm as you pour water into a cracked dishpan, and you laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's the first time anything has touched you with kindness in weeks. Another time, you sit beside her and lean your head against her side, just to feel something else breathing. She blinks, slow and heavy, as if she knows you're unraveling. You start talking to her sometimes, in low tones. Not full conversations, not at first, but mostly questions. Think the snow's stopping? You going to give us some milk today? And eventually, you start saying more. You share memories, jokes, even prayers. She listens the way only animals can. Unbothered, present, unblinking. You ration her feed carefully. She's been eating straw and dried leaves, even bits of last year's thatch roof. It keeps her alive, but just barely. Her ribs are sharp beneath her coat now, and her milk is thinning out. Still, you manage to get a pint a day, maybe a little less, and you treat it like liquid gold. You don't drink it fresh. You mix it with flour, dust, or pour it over boiled roots to make a kind of stew, just enough to smooth the edges of hunger and get you through one more day. One afternoon, the wind dies down. Through the grime on the window, the sun pushes through, faint but real. I pull open the door and stand in the light for just a second. The cold hits hard, a physical blow. But the brightness makes my eyes water. I call it spring, a joke whispered to myself. But my heart, foolish and desperate, wants to believe. Behind me, the cow noses the doorway, sniffing the outside air like a scent she remembers from a dream. But I slam the door shut. Not yet. I've seen what false hope can do. The walls are streaked with soot from the beams overhead. Icicles hang down, formed from our own breath and the rising steam of cooking and living. Every few hours, I have to tap them down with a broom handle so they dainty fall and shatter on someone's head. This isn't a home anymore. It's a survival chamber. In the old countries, peasants often lived under the same roof as their livestock. Heat rises. After all, it was practical, efficient, and maybe a little humbling. But out here on the prairie, where pride can be as fatal as frostbite, humility becomes its own kind of wisdom. You learn to let go of how things are supposed to be. I sometimes wonder what it would be like to show this scene to someone from back east. I imagine him stepping into my little kitchen, his shiny boots sinking into a patch of cow manure. I'd hand him a tin cup of weak tea and ask him if this was the American dream he depictured. There's no official rule for what's happening here. It's not ideal, it's not even reasonable, but it's real. It's our life now. Later, people would talk about winters like this. They'd debate the psychological toll it took. They'd call it prairie madness and say it especially struck women, left alone too long in the endless snow. You start bringing her inside the house during storms. Not the whole way, just into the mudroom. It's warmer there, a small mercy. She doesn't complain. She just stands in the corner, steaming like a kettle in the frigid air, her eyes half closed, swaying ever so slightly on her feet. Her body heat takes the sharpest edge off the cold, and the smell, well, the smell is unpleasant. It's strong, earthy, but you don't mind it anymore. It's the smell of life. And in these times, you'll take it. You're not the only ones either. This is the new normal. All over the county, families are doing the same, making space for their animals where they can. Down in town, they've moved the goats into the church basement, a strange new congregation, huddling for warmth. The schoolhouse is now home to dozens of chickens. They're clucking a faint, muffled sound against the howling wind. There's even a story going around about the Miller family. They brought their 2 pigs right into the parlor. Can you imagine? Wrapped them in old quilts, right there by the hearth. The pigs apparently snorted and rooted around the woodpile, ate whatever crusts fell to the floor. And when spring finally came, those 2 pigs were the only ones in the entire county that hadn't frozen or starved. Survival has a way of changing your priorities. These days, taste is irrelevant. It's a forgotten luxury. Texture is a memory from a different life. You eat what your hands can make, what the earth will grudgingly give up. You boil the same woody root 3 times, and you still save the water, because even that thin, tasteless broth is better than nothing. You chew slowly, deliberately, holding each mouthful as long as you can. It's a small trick, trying to fool your brain, to convince your stomach that there's more coming, that this meager portion is a feast. You make it last, somewhere deep in a drawer, wrapped in a soft cloth and tied with string. You've got a jar of jam, just one, a gift from last summer, a sun-drenched memory sealed under wax, unopened. Sometimes you take it out just to look at it, the deep jeweled color of the berries suspended in the glass. You almost opened it last week when your cousin's boy was sick. He was burning with fever, his lips all cracked and dry. You thought the sweetness might bring him back, but he pulled through on his own. So now, the jam stays put. A treasure for a day that hasn't come yet. Maybe for Christmas, you tell yourself. But even as you think it, you know it's not certain. Maybe not even then. You're starting to wonder what kind of event, what special occasion, could possibly be worthy of such a thing. What celebration could justify it? Every single day brings a new set of impossible decisions. It's a constant negotiation with hunger. What to eat, what not to eat, and more often than not, you choose not. You skip breakfast so that dinner, however small, might be possible. You watch the children eat first. Their small, eager faces, a painful mix of hope and want. You take smaller portions for yourself. You chew longer. You tell yourself you're not hungry anyway. And the strangest part is, it works, at least for now. Your stomach learns to be quiet. Of course, everyone is talking about it. The question is on every chapped lip, in every hollowed eye. How long can this last? Speculation is the only currency we have left. Just a few more weeks, one neighbor says with a confidence he doesn't feel. The mailman, on his last run, said March looks promising, that he saw a break in the clouds. Someone else swore they heard birds last night, a hopeful chirp in the endless, frozen silence. But hope is a fragile thing. The reality is more uncertain than it has ever been. There's no calendar you can trust anymore. The days bleed into one another. You have a new way of telling time. It's the way your hands shake when you try to lift a simple kettle. It's the way your pants, once snug, keep slipping off your hips, no matter how tightly you cinch your belt. That's your new clock. The slow, relentless shrinking of your own body. Later, I'm sure there will be debate. Historians will sit in warm rooms and argue about how healthy the average frontier settler really was during these long, hard winters. Some will argue that, despite the near starvation, people were incredibly tough, lean, hardened, naturally resistant to the cold and the endless stress, forged in hardship. Others will say the malnutrition left them as walking ghosts by the time spring arrived, brittle-boned and sickly, their hair falling out in clumps, their bodies permanently weakened. Honestly, you believe both theories are true, because you feel both. Some mornings, you wake up feeling impossibly strong, a survivor. By dusk, you're delirious with hunger, lightheaded and weak. The strength and the weakness, they come and go in waves. You'd clutch the fuzzy pit in your palm like a piece of treasure, a perfect, simple moment. Now, you would give anything, absolutely anything, for just one taste of that sticky sweetness. Maybe one day you'll taste it again. You have to believe that. But not today. Today is for survival. Today, you gnaw on hard, dry seed bread, and you chew like it's your job, because it is. You sip bitter pine needle tea, and you pretend it's fine wine from a forgotten life. You throw nothing away. Every scrap, every peel, every bone is salvaged and used. You eat, you live, and you wait for the thaw. If this story moved you, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more.